The idea here is there's a myth out there, and you'll hear it from all the professionals. You can't do great flash photos with on-camera flash. And I'm going to show you this really great image when we're going through this video. The first shot I take is just like deer in headlights. It does look horrible. But just because that example is bad doesn't mean you can't produce great images with on-camera flash. So let's watch the video, and then we'll answer some questions when we come out of the video. You know, there's a myth out there that you can't do great photography with on-camera flash. And there's a lot of truth to that because you can do better photography with off-camera flash. But I want to show you how to get great results outside with on-camera flash, okay? So let me start out first of all talking about the camera settings and the flash settings, and then we'll start taking some photos and I'll show you some good approaches and some poor approaches. All right, so we'll start out here with the camera. Now, the camera settings are almost exactly the same as with off-camera flash. You know, I'm still going to build that exposure. I'm still trying to figure out, do I want the ambient light to be dark? Do I want the ambient light to be bright? And so I'm looking at my info screen here, or my shutter speed and aperture settings. I'm at ISO 100. I'm currently at f5, and I'm at a 125th of a second. And you can see on my exposure line, it's a little bit overexposed, just ever so slightly, but that's okay. It's a good starting point. The next is the flash. Now the flash settings are going to be different than when you're doing off-camera flash. I'm setting the flash to the word on, not remote. On meaning it's just like a dedicated TTL flash or a dedicated manual flash. To change the settings, I can push the mode button and change between, let's say, like TTL mode or, let's say, manual mode. Just to make things relatively easy today, I'm going to work in manual mode. In fact, I like working in manual flash mode. It gives me a lot more stability and control, and it helps me understand when I'm taking a photo, oh, that was too bright. Oh, easy, I can lower the power down from, let's say, a 16th power down to a 32nd power. Or, oh, that was too dark, I can bring it up. Sometimes TTL is a little bit dicey in the outside. I use TTL sometimes when I have to move quickly, but I use manual mode anytime I'm doing, let's say, portraiture where the person is standing there and I've got time on my side. So I'm in manual mode, and on this flash I push here, and now I can rotate my dial and change the power up or down. I don't know where this exposure is going to fall, so I'm just going to start out at some number. Let's say 8th power. Let's just see how this works. So to recap, I'm at f5, I'm at 125th of a second, ISO 100, and my flash is in manual output at 1/8 power. Now, we're going to take a picture here, and what I want to show you is the wrong way to do on-camera flash photography. See, what we've got is we've got the flash, and we've got nothing on the front of the flash, no diffusion. This is just straight on direct flash. I'm going to take a picture of Rami here. Welcome to the set, Rami. This is going to be a terrible photograph. So here we go. 1, 2, 3. I'm looking at this image, and it is probably one of the worst flash photos I've ever taken in my life. You know, there's no shape to the light. There's no modeling. There's no nice shadow on this side and bright on that side. It's just straight on direct flash. Now that said, I can reduce the power a little bit and maybe get a little bit of a better look. So I'm going to do that. I'm at a 1/8 power. I'm going to reduce that down to, let's go down to 1/32nd power. So that's 2 stops down from where we were at before. And here we go. 1, 2, 3. Nice smile. Love it. So better light. It's a nicer look. It's still a little hot. The flash is still a little bright. So I'll go down even farther. 64th power. One more stop below. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Nice smile, buddy. Thank you, Rami. All right, cool. So now we're getting a slightly better look to the flash photo, but it's not great. And the truth is I don't really want to spend a whole lot more time messing with this because I'm a professional photographer, and professionals don't hurt their subjects like this. We just don't do that. So how can we get better? How can we get better light? Well, built into your flash, most flashes have a diffusion panel like this. And really the purpose of that diffusion panel is to make the flash go wider angle, So let's say you're shooting with like a 20 millimeter lens, or I don't want to say a fisheye, but a really wide angle lens. This is going to diffuse the light wider to cover more of the scene. So this is not really a great tool for quality lighting, but just to show how it works, I will take one shot. Here we go. All right, 1, 2, 3, great. All right, a little softer, a little kinder, a little gentler, but still not great. Let's move to the next concept, and that is using some type of diffusion panel or diffusion dome. One of my favorite tools are these. It's called a flash bender, made by a company called Rogue. And basically what it does is it just makes the surface of light bigger, larger, and softer. These attach here. Let's put this on my connector here so I can use both my hands. They attach with a Velcro and a snap. Really easy to use. There we go. So what we're going to do is we're going to basically bend it forward like this, and we're going to take the picture, and when we take the picture we have to get kind of close to the subject. When you do this, it really reduces the amount of power or the volume of light going to the subject. So I'm going to have to get fairly close to make this work. Everything else is basically going to stay the same for this first shot here. Are you ready, Remy? All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3. All right, so now I look at this shot, and it's a much softer look, but hardly any power from the flash made it to Remy. So I'm going to increase the power, because if you look at how this thing works, it sends light up, and then that light goes forward. It's just a bigger surface area, so it's absorbing a lot of the energy. So here I'm going to go to, let's go to 16th power. All right, same shot again. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. You have a nice smile.
Thank you.
Yeah. Excellent. So I'm looking at that image. Good. About a 16th power is where I need to be. So this is not a really compelling image though. You know, there isn't a lot of modeling or shaping of the light, but it is softer. And so if you're a run and gun type of photographer, if you're doing, let's say, portraits where kids are running around the field, or you've got some type of action going on, this may be all you can do, because it's hard, you know, it's hard to use a reflector, it's hard to use a light stand when you're trying to be mobile. So this is a really great option for when you have to be mobile. I would say this, I'm gonna go down here and pick up this other product. Look at the size difference between the products. You know, this is a diffusion dome here, and this is the flash bender. So the larger the surface area that you're shooting through, the better your images will be. So always think bigger rather than smaller. This is easy, this little diffusion dome is easy because it's so small and portable, but the quality of light isn't going to be that great. So try larger. So we were just shooting on-camera flash using some type of diffuser on top of the flash, and that's great for run and gun photography when you have to be mobile. But what if you have a little bit more time and you want to shoot a little bit more of a traditional type of portrait? In that case, what you want to do is you want to point your flash towards something like a reflector so that it looks like the light comes from a different source. And that's the key to shooting great kind of outdoor portraiture with your flash. You want the light to be coming from a different angle so we can get some shaping and some modeling on the subject. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to basically point the flash right here into the reflector. The reflector is then going to bounce the flash onto our subject, Remy. Now, what do I have here? Well, basically I have a light stand. I've got a reflector bracket right here on top that's just holding it in place. I'm using a standard clamp, a little metal clamp here on the bottom to keep the wind from blowing it around. And then I've got a sandbag down below. Sandbags are really important, especially if it's a little bit windy. You just don't want everything you don't want things falling over. All right, I'm going to build that exposure again. I'm looking at my exposure here. I'm looking through the camera, and just to show people at home what we're seeing, I'm at f5. I'm at 125th of a second, and I'm at ISO 100. I'm going to take one picture before I shoot with the flash, just to see what that image looks like. So I turn my flash off, and I'll take that picture now. All right, Remy, 1, 2, 3. Great. All right, cool. And I purposely, when I took this shot, I purposely underexposed it ever so slightly because I want the flash to kind of build the exposure so that he brightens up from the flash. Okay, so now I'll turn the flash on. And I'm currently at 1/16 power with the flash. I don't know what that's gonna look like in the final image, so right now it's just a guess, so we'll see how that goes. Remy, I'm gonna have you move that way just a little bit. Perfect. Cool. And now what I need to do is I need to basically play pool or billiards with the light. I just wanna make sure that the light's gonna go here, it's gonna reflect onto him there, so you just don't want the flash basically to be, shooting straight into this, because then it doesn't reflect towards the subject. So I'm gonna angle it forward just a little bit. All right, you ready?
Yeah.
All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3. And we'll take a look. Cool. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit here so I can look into his eyes. I like looking in the eyes to see if we got a nice catch light, a nice reflection in his eyes, and we do. What I'm noticing though, and this is a real particular point that I want to make, is if we zoom in really close in this photo, you'll see 2 catch lights. There's a big catch light that's coming from this, and that's the good catch light. But then there's also a little tiny catch light, almost like a little pinprick in his eye, and that's coming from this flash. This flash is actually angled forward just enough that it's hitting him. So if you don't want that second kind of little tiny pinprick, we can flag the flash. You could flag it with your hand like this, or you can use some gaff tape and some paper and flag it that way. For this next photo though, I'm just gonna flag it with my hand to prevent that little pinprick of light coming forward. All right, so we'll take that again. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Nice. Cool, and now I'm gonna look real closely. Perfect. Basically, we have 1 catch light in his eye. It makes me real happy. All right, I'm gonna have you turn a little bit. Turn this shoulder towards me. Cool. And yeah, this is basically a torso shot. It's just a head shot. I'm gonna have you come forward a little bit closer. And the reason why I'm turning him this way is because I want a little bit more of his eye catching the light from the reflector. All right, I'm gonna flag that again. And 1, 2, 3. Makes me happy. It's a good looking photo. Perfect. We got nice catch lights in his eyes. The flash isn't too bright. I'm real pleased with that image. I'm gonna take one more though because my framing wasn't that great. I need to gain another couple inches. Take this shot one more time. 1, 2, 3. Fantastic. Thank you. So that was great. You can see very inexpensive way to produce good-looking shots in the field, not even using an umbrella or a softbox, just doing on-camera flash. But the key is always make it look like the flash was from another source. So bouncing it into the reflector, using some type of diffusion surface like I have here, anything along those lines will make the photos just look that much better. If you're going through the expense to, be a portrait artist, then I don't recommend using these devices for your higher end portraiture outdoors. They just don't have enough surface area. And I know from talking to some of you that you use these. And these work great for events, they work great for being mobile, but not the perfect solution for outdoor portraiture. So bounce, diffuse. Don't shoot straight undiffused flash from the hot shoe, otherwise the result is a frowny face photo. Sorry for my little emoji. But yeah, so here's the worst flash photo on planet Earth. Everyone out there in internet land is going, yes, I've done that shot. I've made that shot myself. It's a great smile, but very poor execution on the photographer. So finding a way to reduce the intensity of light by diffusing it. This is using my Rogue flash bender, that image right there. That's literally this thing that I have in my hands. I love this. It's about 10 inches square, and the truth is if Rogue made one of these that was like 2 foot square, I'd use that one. Bigger is better. Then the next is pointed at the reflector. So this one turned out really well. I like this shot. But this one, as you saw, had the double catch lights in the eyes. And that bothered me. Some people are like, yeah, I don't really care. Other people are like, I don't want the double catch lights. So I fixed that with flagging it. This is the one where I flagged it with my hand. Really great look overall. The background We got a great spark on his face, fills in the shadows underneath his black sweatshirt, and then we zoom into the eyes, and we just have basically one catch light there in his eyes, and I'm real pleased with that look. So simple, inexpensive, easy, and great look. This is really where it's going to be at. You're going to want to do off-camera flash. So we've got another great video here showing you an umbrella and a softbox and a reflector. So let's talk about off-camera flash, and that's really where it's at. That's where most professionals and most aspiring amateurs want to be. You want to be off-camera flash because that gives you a lot of control over the direction of light, the quality of light, and positioning the subject. You know, off-camera flash is really where it's at. So what I've got here, I've got an umbrella, got a light stand, and I've got a flash. And so let's just talk through a couple of these things here real quick so that you understand what you might need for off-camera flash photography. First thing is the light stand. I have a bunch of light stands, and what I've found over the years is that taller is better. This stand is basically a 9-foot, maybe it's an 8-foot, it's an 8 or 9-foot light stand. And I find for most of my outdoor work, I want at least 8-foot tall light stand. That allows me to extend the light very, very high. Also, if I'm working with a tall subject like Bergen here, he's about 6'2", 6'3", somewhere in that range. I need that light to go up much higher than he is so that the catch light looks properly positioned. So make sure that you get a stand that's at least 8 feet tall. 9 to 10 feet is even better. The next thing I have here is called a flash bracket, a light stand flash umbrella bracket. So basically it attaches here to the top of the light stand, and then the umbrella goes right through there in the shaft. You can see how that works. I then have a plastic mount for my flash that mounts right there on top of the stand. This plastic mount comes with most of your flashes when you buy them retail, so that's not an extra purchase. And then the umbrella here, I basically have a Pro Photo. This is called a medium-size umbrella. You can see it's silver. When I'm in the studio, indoors, I like using white because white is kinder, gentler, softer. But when I'm outdoors, I need a lot of light reflected back onto the subject because a lot of times I'm fighting the sun and I'm working with really bright conditions. These little flashes, these little strobes don't have a lot of power, a lot of energy, so I need as much light reflected back onto the subject as possible. So outdoor flash, I love using the silver umbrellas. So now let's talk about positioning. Bergen is nice and tall, so I've got this flash up. I did a test shot just a minute ago, and what I found was I wasn't getting a lot of catch light in his eye because I actually had the umbrella too high. So I brought the umbrella down a little bit so I get a nice little catch light in his eye. Back to building the exposure. I'm going to start building that exposure now. So aim the camera towards Bergen. I'm looking at my ISO. I'm at 100. I'm looking at my aperture. It's at f/5.6. I'm looking at my shutter speed, and I'm at 160th of a second. That's a pretty good starting point. I'm going to take a picture without the flash and just see what that looks like. So turn off the flash there. All right, test shot, 1, 2, 3. Look at the results. And the background looks a little bit bright for me, just a little bit bright. So I'm going to make the background darker by increasing the shutter speed to a 2/50th of a second. And remember, I don't want to go above a 2/50th of a second because then I'd be fighting the synchronization speed, the maximum synchronization speed. So we'll take one more test shot there. 1, 2, 3. Cool, man. Good. Much darker, much better. I'm happy with that. Now it's time to add in the flash. So I'm going to turn on my flash. And let's go into the menu system. I'll show you how I have that flash set. My remote flash is on manual mode, and I'm at 1/16th power. I don't know if that's good or bad, so we'll just start there. I'm guessing we'll probably end up at about a 16th, maybe a 32nd. We'll see. All right, now we'll take the portrait. All right, Bergen, I'm gonna have you bring the shoulder in just a little bit. Cool. And look right here at the camera, and 1, 2, 3. All right, look at the result. And I'm just gonna compare the previous shot I took with no flash with this one where I took with the flash. And I'm looking at the eyes And absolutely, we've got a much better look. I'm gonna zoom in, looking at his catch lights. If we've got good catch lights, we have okay catch lights, not great. So I might want to lower the flash down a little bit more to get a little bit better flash catch lights. Just gonna drop it maybe a couple inches, about there. All right. And here we go again. All right, 1, 2, 3. Good. Give me a smile this time. All right, Mom would be proud. 1, 2, 3. All right, now I zoom in, look at the eyes, looking at the eyes for those catch lights. And I'm gonna say it's not quite enough flash power. So I'll go back to the menu, and I'm gonna increase the power to 1/8. So I was at 1/16, and I'm gonna go to 1/8. So that's 1 stop more flash power. So in other words, twice as much light from the flash. All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3. And I'll shoot vertical. 1, 2, 3. All right, cool. In my opinion, that's a little bit better, a little bit more vibrant, a little snappier, better catch lights in the eye. And just because I can, I'm gonna take one more shot with a little more power just to see what that's gonna look like. A lot of times it's hard to tell when you're out in the field on these little screens. We'll know more when we get back to the studio. Push OK. I'm at 1/4 power now. All right, 1, 2, 3. And that was too much. So from 1/8 to 1/4 was definitely too much. So probably where I'll end up is probably like a 1/4 minus 2/3 of a stop, or 1/4 minus 1/3. And just for fun, we'll try that one more time. So we'll go 1/4 minus 2/3, or minus 0.7. And we'll take this last shot with the umbrella. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Cool, man. Yeah, I'm happy with that. That's a good look. Well, one of the things that I'm noticing, is it'd be nice to have a little bit of fill on the other side of his face. So now you can see that the umbrella and the flash is on my right. It'd be nice to have a fill on my left. So I'm gonna bring in a reflector and show you how to use a reflector with an umbrella in the field. So when you're using off-camera flash, a lot of times you have one light source, a single flash and an umbrella like I have here. But we want to mimic multiple light sources. And if you're on a budget, one of the easiest ways to mimic multiple light sources is to use a reflector. So I've brought in a reflector here. This is just like a standard, it's like a 42-inch or a 45-inch reflector. And I brought it in, you can see how tight I am. I'm nice and tight here. I've got basically this little tiny studio. And you can see I've got my subject, Bergen, he's back here. He's kind of like inside the whole setup. He's in between the lights. The key light, or the main light, is here with the umbrella, and then the fill is gonna be this reflector. The fill is almost always on the shaded side of the face. And there's a million different ways you can do this. You can have the fill light like down low with the umbrella up high. That's more of like a clamshell light. What I have here is more like a split light setup, where the light is split. It's coming from one side and then reflecting off of the other. Just to make things easy so you can understand, we're just gonna work with the split light setting right now. Close counts, you'll hear me say this a lot in my photography. You gotta get this stuff, all the diffusion, all of the light sources in close to the subject. Otherwise, you lose the size benefit of the diffusion. The softer, or the closer the diffusion is to the subject, the softer the light is. So close counts. So I think we're ready to take a shot. I'm just gonna double check my settings here real quick, just to remind everyone where we're at. I'm at f5.6. I'm at a 2/50th of a second. That's my maximum shutter sync speed. And I'm at I'm at ISO 100. I'm using remote flash. We'll go into my menu system here real quick just to double check where my flash settings are. I'm in manual mode for that remote flash, and I'm at 1/4 power and minus 2/3 from 1/4 power. So that's almost 1/8 power. And we're ready to take a test shot. So let's see how this works. You ready, Bergen?
I'm ready.
All right, cool. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Cool. And let me look at the results of that image. It's a nice looking shot. I'm gonna zoom in, check his eyes, make sure our catch lights are good to go. Nice catch lights. Yeah, real nice. Now, I've got a little space to work with. A lot of times I like my reflector to be in very, very close to the subject. So I'm actually gonna do that. I'm actually gonna move the reflector in ever so slightly closer. There we go. It feels a little bit close, doesn't it? A little bit uncomfortable, but as long as if you have the subject just kind of focus on you and pay attention to you, very quickly the studio equipment just fades away. Alrighty, here we go. Ready for the next one? Yeah. All right, 1, 2, 3. And 1, 2, 3. Let's shoot a vertical picture. I'm gonna have you bring your right arm forward. Right, nice. 1, 2, 3. Excellent. I'm gonna zoom in real quickly and look at the quality of light in his face. It's a nice look, really nice look. I'm also checking focus, just making sure that I've nailed the focus on his eyes. Nothing worse than out of focus portraits. Let me look at my horizontal image. Real nice. All right, there you have it, shooting with a reflector and an umbrella. So let's talk about softboxes and why they're different than umbrellas. Softboxes allow a different shape of light. You know, umbrellas are round, give a nice round catch light. Softboxes allow us to do kind of a square catch light. But another advantage of softboxes is it allows us to really control the direction of light and to prevent light from spilling off into areas we don't want them to go, or we don't want the light to go. So what I have here is what's called a speed ring, but it's specifically designed to work with your little strobes, your little Nikon and Canon strobes. So I've got the standard light stand, and then attached to the light stand, you've got the speed ring. It's called a Speedlite speed ring. And you can see the way that it works is that the softbox, the metal stays go right into the speed ring, right there. And then the flash attaches to this what's called a cold shoe. Another cool thing about this specific brand, this is a Profoto softbox, is you can rotate the softbox very quickly and very easily to get different looks. One of the reasons I love Profoto gear is because it gives us all of this flexibility and capability, and it's just very durable. On the other side of it, let me rotate it around. You can see that we basically just have a white diffusion panel. So the flash is shining into the softbox and then through the white diffusion panel. Softboxes tend to eat up a lot of energy. They suck up a lot of light, and they diffuse the light over a pretty big surface area. So just keep this in mind that when you're shooting outdoors, you may, especially on a sunny day, you may not have enough oomph or enough energy from the flash. You may have to use 2 flashes in the softbox. In this case today, I only have 1 flash. It's a cloudy day. This 1 flash is gonna work just fine. All right, so how about positioning the softbox? We've got Ramy here. Ramy's about 6 feet tall or so, and so I want the softbox to be about 6 foot 6 inches high. I like the softbox to be slightly higher than the eyes. So I'm gonna bring this up, about like that, and then I'm gonna tip it down so it's kind of pointed towards his head. And what I do is I imagine there's kind of like a rod going through the softbox shining to the subject. And then Ramy, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna actually stand in front of you just so I can make sure the positioning is good.
Sure.
Great. Just like to align it so it looks about right. Cool. I'm gonna build that exposure again. So let's just double check my settings. I'm at f5.6. I'm at a 1/160th of a second. I'm at ISO 100, and that looks about right. We'll just take a quick test shot. Actually, I'm gonna take 1 shot without the flash and 1 shot with the flash. All right, 1, 2, 3. Nice smile. Great. All right, his eyes are a little bit dark, so we'll add the flash in and brighten them up. I got a green light there, it means it's communicating wirelessly to the flash, and I'm just gonna double check my power. I'm at manual output at 1/16th power. Okay. Here we go. Give me a nice smile. 1, 2, 3. Sweet. Look at that result. I'll look in the eyes for the catch light. Yeah, we got a nice catch light. So here's what I'm noticing though, that at 1/16 power, it's a little bit hot on his face. His face looks a little bit too bright. I'm gonna decrease the power a little bit. Go into the menu, go to my group flash options, and I'm at 16th, so I need to drop it down. I'm gonna drop it down by a full stop and go to 1/32 power. That cuts the amount of light by half. All right, here we go again. 1, 2, 3. Nice, that's a little bit better. Now here's one of the things that I want to talk about next. We're outdoors and the light is changing. From when we started shooting just about an hour ago, it's much brighter. I need to be thinking about that as I'm putting together these exposures. The ambient light already, I think, is too bright for this photo. So I want to increase my shutter speed, faster shutter speed, to make the ambient light darker. And that will help him stand out a little bit more from the background. So I'm going to go from 1/160th of a second up to 1/250th of a second, and that's to drop down the ambient light brightness. Here we go again. Nice job. Okay, cool. I feel better about that. I dropped the ambient light down, the background's a little bit darker, but now I feel like I want to add in a little more flash to bring his face up a little bit more. So again, we'll do that. And we'll go into the group flash options and go back up to a 16th power. Push OK. All right, here we go. Nice job, buddy. 1, 2, 3. Oh yeah, okay, cool. That's a really nice looking image. I'm happy with that. All right, cool. So we've already shot some of the pictures with just the softbox, and now I want to bring in a reflector. And just like before, how I talked about keeping things close, I want to do the same thing in this scenario. But one more thing that we need to think about is when we're shooting with the softbox, the light is very controlled. In other words, the light doesn't really diffuse out like it does in an umbrella. So we have to be much more precise about the angles and the reflections of all of our products here, our softbox and the reflector. So I'm going to start by rotating the softbox towards Remy. There we go. Basically keep that the same as it was before. Now with the reflector, I'm going to bring that around front and make a nice tight studio. And these are all sandbagged, which is good, but it can make it a little bit harder to move around. Nice and tight. So this tightness will make the portrait look really nice, really soft. All right, everything else is the same as before. Basically, I'm at ISO 100, I'm at f5.6, I'm at a 2/50th of a second, which means my background's gonna be a little bit darker, which is what I'm after. My flash setting is still at, I think, 1/16th power. Yep, I'm at 1/16th power. And we'll take our first shot. All right, Remy, here we go. 1, 2, 3, great. Look at the results of that image. Just doing a quick chimp. Oh yeah, nice look on the face, great. I'm gonna increase the power a little bit. He's wearing a black sweatshirt, and so I wanna maybe bring out a little bit more detail on the black sweatshirt. Let's just see what that looks like. I'll bring this up now to, let's go to an 1/8 power. Hit okay. And we'll take this next picture at 1/8 power. Right on. 1, 2, 3. Great. And I brought it up to 1/8, and I quickly realized that it was probably too much. It's a little bit too hot. As you can see in this image, there's too much reflection off of his face and off of his cheeks. So that was the wrong move. But that's the cool thing about digital. You can take a shot, take a look. You don't like it, you reduce the power or increase the power. All right, I'm gonna do one more quick change here. I'm gonna rotate the softbox to the side just to see if we can get a little bit different look to the photo. Yeah, and I'm gonna shoot right through the gap, I'm gonna decrease the power back down to a 1/16th. All righty, here we go. I think this will be our last shot here with the reflector. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, it's still a little hot even now, so I'm gonna drop it down one more stop, bring it down to a 32nd power. Okay, I promise this will be the last one. Famous last words. Cool, man. Thank you. Well, you can see that setting up these shots in the real world takes a little trial and error. And I kind of, as I'm watching it back, I'm kind of feeling like, yeah, it's try this, do that, look at it and change. But that's the way it really works in real life. Hopefully you can get this stuff worked out before your client is on set with you. So it's nice to be able to have someone else with you to test and practice on, so that when the client finally comes, you're ready to go and you can just start taking pictures. Once you get the basics out of the way, though, you're golden. You're going to get great shots. Those are really fantastic looking shots of Ramey. Off-camera flash gives you much more control, much more ability to decide where the light's from, what the shape of light is going to be. I used two modifiers in this example. I used umbrellas and softboxes. And in my opinion, you don't need to spend a whole lot more money on other stuff until you need a specialty type of product. You can get 95, 99% of your work done with just an umbrella and a softbox. And it produces a nice professional look, and it elevates you above others who aren't using this equipment. And it's not that complicated. I think you saw as I'm setting that up, you're like, yeah, I can do that. That's just ISO 100. That's just f5.6, and that's a 250 to the second. I know these terms. They work. And then adding in flash at a 16th power. Great photos. So a couple of ideas for flash setups, and I do just two real simple light setups. One is an off-axis light setup. Off-axis is literally the flash here and the camera there, so a little bit off-axis. So that's one. And then off-axis with the reflector, okay? So by adding in the reflector, you get another look to that. And then the other is what we call a clamshell, or on-axis. And to do this, I'm just going to run over here real quick to this little demo area. And let's pretend that the camera is back there. So on-axis is this. So if the camera is shooting like this, the camera is basically right next to the light stand, or right next to the post. And then we can pull in a reflector underneath here as well. So this basically get a catch light right on the top of the eye and another little fill down below. This is called clamshell lighting. And both are great looks, and depending on the person, depending on their face shape, depending on their body, depending on if they have a good side or a bad side, you may elect to do either on-axis lighting or off-axis lighting. If the subject is in shade, we need to think about the direction where the ambient light is coming from. So let's imagine this. Let's imagine you're in a city and you've moved your subject into the shade of a building, but behind the subject, the sun is shining from, right to left, something like that. So the sun direction in the background is going this way. So where should you put the flash if the subject is in the shade? Well, generally you want to match the direction of the background light with the flash. So if the subject is in the shade, you want the light to appear as if it's all coming from the same direction. That's different, though, if the subject is in the sun. If the subject is the sun, remember we did that before where the sun's kind of back here, then the flash is directly opposite of that. So does that kind of make sense? The subject in the shade, have the light come from the same direction as the background light. If the subject is in the sun, well, then it's opposite the sun. And the reason why we do that is because it just looks odd if the subject's in the shade, the background light's going that way, and then your flashlight's going that way. It's just something that appears weird about that. And then if it's an overcast day, well, then you get to choose. Where's the light coming from? It's all on you. All right, just a quick, as we finish up here for this segment, just to kind of go through, the photos that we saw were the raw, unprocessed photos. And I just like to show with a little bit more work in Lightroom or post-processing what those might look like. So here's just to add a little bit of contrast, a little bit of color, a little bit of vibrance actually in Lightroom. This was off-camera flash using the umbrella at 1/250th of a second, f5.6 and ISO 100. And here's the vertical composition of that. Really nice I like the feel of that photo. And we got a smile out of him, which makes me happy. He's a good, handsome kid. More of a serious guy, though. So, and then that's what the catch light looks like with an umbrella, and then nice lighting across his face. I'm really happy with the image. And then here's just another image where I just converted it to black and white just to give a different look. And I think that one was the softbox photo. Yeah, that's the softbox. And again, ISO 100, f5.6 in a 1/250th of a second. So, cool. Well, here's where we're at. We've gone through the basics. You know, right now, you know everything you need to know to do great off-camera flash photography outside, okay? Well, you know almost everything you need to know. Because there's a few things that we have to learn, like specifically around, well, what do we do if it's really bright outside? You know, what if I can't shoot at a 2/50th a second? So when we come back from break, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about neutral density filters. I'm going to talk about high-speed sync. And then in the last segment, we're going to get into some sports and action photography, kind of put it all together for what initially feels like a very complicated shoot, but you're going to see it's actually not that complicated at all. So that's the plan for this afternoon. You now have the basics. You've got everything you need to know to start out doing your outdoor flash photography. Now, this next segment is really maybe what I would call troubleshooting and adding a little bit extra pizzazz to your photography. So we're going to talk about high-speed sync. We're going to talk about neutral density filters, and then using gels. I want to explain why gels are a good thing to help, especially when you're doing portraiture with people. So the first presentation that I have here is about ND filters, okay? So let's talk about ND filters. I'm going to introduce the concept of ND filters first. I'm going to show you what the filter looks like, and then we'll go into our video, our on-location video. So already you know that your camera has a maximum shutter speed sync. In other words, the fastest speed that your camera will work with a flash is probably 1/250th of a second, okay? Some of the Nikon cameras and some of the Canon cameras also have a lower threshold at 1/200th of a second. I've even seen some, I don't remember which brand, but some cameras had a 1/180th of a second maximum sync speed. Well, as we've already been discussing, what happens when the light's too bright, okay? We have to find a way to keep that shutter speed down to a 1/250th of a second. Well, we've already talked about ISO, right? You can drop your ISO down to as low as it'll go. We talked about aperture. We talked about shutter speed, you know, reaching up to that limit. Someone asked me this quick question, and I'm going to repeat your question, and that was, can I just use exposure compensation? Can I use exposure compensation to change the brightness of the scene? And the answer is no, because once you've reached your limit of shutter speed, you know, you can't change your exposure anymore, especially with your shutter speed, because once you're at 1/250th, if you bring your exposure compensation down, the way that it does that is it just increases your shutter speed to a 3/20th or a 400th or a 500th of a second. So the only solution is to find a way to limit the amount of light coming into the camera. Actually, that's one solution. The other solution that we're going to talk to in 2 videos down the road is about doing high-speed sync. Okay, so first of all, neutral density filters. I'm going to grab my filter and I'm going to come right back here. So I've got 2 different brands, and I bought these on, I bought one of them from my favorite camera store online, and the other I bought from Amazon. And I just wanted to, as I was experimenting with these, I've owned them for some filters like these for a number of years, but I've recently wanted to see what would a really inexpensive filter do. Does it work? Is it worth the money? So these are neutral density filters, and more specifically, they're variable neutral density filters. And we'll see here in the video that when I twist it, it gets brighter or darker based on where the position is. So really how they work is kind of like a polarizer. In fact, technically, they're kind of 2 polarizers stacked together, and it gives you this variable neutral density effect. The concept here is the light comes into the camera, and then you reduce the amount of light until you see that your shutter speed is down to a 2/50th of a second, okay? Buy this, as we'll talk in the video, I talk about buying the right size for your camera, or the right size for your lens. This is a little bit higher quality one. This is made by a company called Vivitar. I think I paid, I'm gonna guess, $50 for this one. Here's another one made by a company I've never actually heard of before, Fotka. And I think I paid $12 for this one. But you get what you pay for. You all know this. In lenses and optical quality, you get what you pay for. I want you, when we watch this video, I want you to see that there is actually a color shift that happens as well. A lot of the neutral part of this means that there's no color cast associated with it. The density part of it means that it gets darker. So ideally, they don't induce a color shift. But the reality is they do induce a color shift. And you'll see it if you watch closely in this video. I want you to watch for that. So the Fotka has a much stronger color shift than the Vivitar. And the Vivitar, there's higher quality density, neutral densities than Vivitar. The higher quality ones are going to be in the hundreds of dollars. But as I've just shown here, for $50, you can get a pretty good quality neutral density filter to work for most of your work. So with that said, let's go into the video and let's learn about how this works in real life. So what do you do if your flashes don't support high-speed sync? Let's say the flashes you're using aren't proprietary. In other words, they're not like a Nikon flash or a Canon flash that allows you to shoot above a 2/50th of a second. In that case, you're stuck to shooting 1/250th. In other words, you can't shoot a 500th or a 1,000th of a second. You have to stay below a 2/50th. Well, how do you do that if you still want to shoot f2.8? Well, the way that you do it is you use one of these. This is called a variable neutral density filter. Let me show you the edge here. And what we've got is as we rotate the front element, you can change the brightness level from very dark to basically full light transmission, okay? This allows me to vary how much light comes in through the lens. And so basically what I'm going to be doing is I take this shot, I'm going to be rotating this down until I get to a 2/50th of a second. Once I get to a 2/50th of a second, I'll leave the lens set up just like that, and then I'll take my shot, just like standard sync or standard shutter speed synchronization. So let me run through that in the real world. I'll take a couple pictures with the variable neutral density filter. It just screws onto the front of your camera, on the front of your lens. Get the right size filter for whatever lens that you have. This is a 72 millimeter filter, or I'm sorry, a 77 millimeter filter. And when I start framing these things up, I'm gonna frame it so it lets in as much light as possible. That allows me to focus, it allows me to compose. And then as I'm setting the exposure, I'll have to be actually looking through the camera, so I won't be able to show you what the shutter speed and aperture settings are, but I'll call them out. All right, so here we start. We'll start here. I'm at f2.8, and currently I'm at 1/2000th of a second, okay? I'm gonna start reducing the brightness, bringing the brightness down. I'm just rotating the front element. And as I'm doing that, I'm rotating my shutter control till I get to about a 2/50th of a second. So I'm kind of doing this delicate balance between shutter speed and how much light I allow in from the front. I'm at a 2/50th of a second. I'm gonna rotate the front dial till my exposure zeroes out. All right, cool. And now I'm just gonna take a quick test shot. Back to that building the exposure that I've been talking about all day. I'm gonna take a test shot with no flash. Okay, here we go, 1, 2, 3. Look at the results. Alrighty, we got decent color or decent brightness. Maybe it needs to be a little bit brighter. So how do we get it brighter? Well, I'm gonna take some off of my variable neutral density filter. All right, there we go. Now it looks to be about +1. It's a bright background, and about +1 on the exposure is where I wanna be. All right, here we go, another test shot. Cool, got some kayaks over your shoulder, nice ambiance there in the background. I'm happy with that for my base exposure. I'm still at a 2/50th of a second, so now I'm going to turn my flash on, looking for a communication. We're all green, and we'll just take a quick test shot. All right, here we go, for real. 1, 2, 3. Nice. So now I'm looking at before with no flash and after with the flash. And the flash did fire, but the flash fired, it's pretty hot, it's pretty bright. So now I'm going to go into my to the menu system and reduce the power of that flash. I was at 1/8 power. I'm gonna bring that down to, maybe I'll start with a 16th power. Another test shot here. Great, 1, 2, 3. That's looking better. It's still looking a little hot, so I'm gonna dial it down one more time to 1/32 power, and I bet that's where we're gonna end up. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3, and I'm gonna do another tighter. 1, 2, 3. You got this great smile, man. You just perma smile. I love it. Really nice image. The lighting is subtle. It blends in with the environment and the ambient light. It's just a really great looking on location flash photo. So thanks. So neutral density filter, very easy way to control the amount of ambient light coming into your camera. The people that need this type of filter are those whose cameras don't support high-speed sync, okay? So if your camera doesn't support high-speed sync, usually I'll say more consumer-oriented cameras don't support the high-speed sync function. So cameras less than, I don't know, $700 US, somewhere around there, that and below don't really support the high-speed sync. Prosumer cameras and obviously pro cameras do support high-speed sync. So if you're limited to that shutter speed, 2/50th, you're going to use this. And I don't know if it was entirely clear exactly what I was doing there on set or on location, so let me describe that. So I set my camera shutter speed to 1/250th of a second. That's the first thing I did, set it to 1/250th. Then I rotate my variable neutral density filter until I see the exposure line drop down to the 0 point. At that point, I'm at 1/250th and my exposure is set for the scene. So does that make sense? I just set my shutter speed first and then rotated this to bring in the amount of light to get to 0 on my exposure line. And then back to a question earlier today, how do you decide how bright or how dark you want that background? Well, that's a creative choice. So I can go a little bit less light, a little bit more light, depending on what I want that background to look like. Okay, so let's look at this photo here. Our parkour athlete. I shot this at f2.8. So here I used a Nikon 24-70 f2.8 lens. I shot f2.8 because I wanted the background to go all blurry. So that opens up the camera 2 more stops of light from f5.6, right? And so that's just a lot more light coming in. And so there's no way. I think for this picture, the ambient light exposure would have been like, I don't know, I think it was 1/2000th of a second. So rotated this, got it nice and dark for the background, then used the flash for the foreground. I did a little bit of post-processing in Lightroom, but just a little bit. Sometimes what I like to do, and you can see this a little bit in the image. Can you see how the background's kind of blue and then he's warm? I do that on purpose. Kind of helps the person stand out. Warm and cool colors, they're complementary colors. They look really well together, look nice together. So I think the actual exposure, if we saw from the video earlier on, did you see how there's kind of an orange cast overall? Did you notice that color cast? And that's because this filter isn't truly neutral in color. Yeah, there's a little bit of a color cast, and you almost always will find that with neutral density filters. You have to pay a ton of money to get a filter that doesn't give you a little bit of color cast. But that's why we shoot RAW. RAW allows us to do white balance, allows us to kind of fine-tune the colors of the image after the fact. Right on. So let's open up for questions real quick. If there are any questions on this filter and this application. Question up front.
Hi, I have a variable neutral density filter, and when I sometimes use it, I get, and this might be a little bit off topic, but I get sort of a...
X pattern.
Yes. Thank you. I was finding it difficult to explain it. Yeah.
What is it?
What's that from, and how can you eliminate that from happening?
Okay, perfect. If you look at this closely, you'll see that it has a maximum setting and a minimum setting, okay? The minimum setting, there's no darkening. Well, there's probably a little bit, but there's no real reduction in light transmission. When you go to the maximum setting, remember I said this behaves like a polarizing filter? What you get is you get kind of this weird polarization effect. I don't know if you've ever worn polarized sunglasses while looking through your camera with a polarized filter. Has anyone ever done this before? It's really crazy. It like wigs you out. That's why I don't wear polarized sunglasses anymore in my photography, because when I'm using a polarizing lens, you get these weird cross patterns. And so that's what's happening when you go like all the way to the maximum or even past maximum. That's where these problems start coming into play. So never go, my rule of thumb with these types of filter is I never actually go to the maximum arrow position. I usually will stay, for whatever it's worth, this side of it, and you won't generally get that X pattern. So even though it says, maybe you bought a 10-stop neutral density filter, it'll go up to a maximum of 10. I very rarely actually go over there because I know that I will sometimes get this funky patterns. And seeing the reviews, seeing these filter reviews online, for these like Amazon reviews, people always give them thumbs down because they produce all these X patterns. Well, they generally are actually going too far in the rotation. Another way to prevent those X patterns is to spend more money. The $20 filter is going to have these problems well before the $100 filter. So as always, you get what you pay for.
One question that had come in from Joanne on ND filters, and she was wondering if that's something you would use to get a blurred background.
Yes, and so like here, in this example, the blurry background it's not because the filter, the blurry background is because of the aperture I'm using. So, if it was a filter effect, if it was a soft filter, then our model would be blurry as well. Everything would be blurry. So yes, to answer your question, the way that you get the background to go out of focus is to use the big aperture, and then adding all that together, the big aperture means more light comes to the camera, which means my shutter speed is too high, which means I have to drop down the shutter speed and use this neutral density filter. In general, you want to set the scene up before you put the filter on. Make sure your client is standing, or make sure the flower is where it's going to be and the tripod is positioned and the lights are in position. Because once you rotate that filter, you can't see through it anymore. You can't look through your camera, and your camera's autofocus system may not work. So basically do everything first, get the focus set, the position set, the framing set, and then rotate your filter to get the ambient light to the right level, okay? Set it up, focus compose, then rotate the filter until you reach the 250th of a second. After you've done that, now you're going to do just like I described earlier today. You're going to increase the flash power to compensate for the reduction from the rotated filter. So before, you might have had to have used, let's say, 16th power on your flash, but now with the ND filter, you have to go more like half power, or maybe even full power, because this basically takes all the light from outside the camera and prevents it from coming in the camera. So you'll probably have to like double or even triple your flash power when using these. So sometimes when I start using these, I start thinking I probably have to start ganging together 2 flashes rather than 1.